There are 10,000 ways to die in the 41st millennium, but only one way to truly live, to serve the Imperium without question. For me, that service came not beneath the open sky or amidst the endless trenches, but inside a steel coffin, a Leman Russ battle tank. I speak in the first person because life inside a tank is not a story told in detached records. It's sweat, oil, and blood soaked into your very skin. You can smell it on me still, though decades have passed. The walls of our war machine closed around us like a womb, but it was a womb of metal that promised death more often than rebirth. If you crave more tales of the dark millennium, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who support the channel. And now, let me tell you what it is to breathe, fight, and burn as an Astra Militarum tank crewman. The tank hummed around us, a familiar vibration that worked its way through bone and marrow. Each of us had our place. Garrin, our commander, his eyes fixed to the periscope like a hawk in a cage. Sella, the gunner, whose hands caressed the great battle cannon's targeting dials as if they were a lover. Brann, loader and strongman, whose every motion was a grunt and a curse as he heaved shell after shell into the chamber. And me, the driver, hunched low, gripping the controls as though I could feel the treads clawing the soil through sheer will alone. Inside, it was cramped, hotter than a forge despite the recirculators. The air tasted of recycled sweat and promethium fumes. Every surface was slick with machine grease, every sound amplified, the clank of shell casings, the whir of gyros, the hiss of vox static. To outsiders, the Leman Russ is a weapon of glory. To us, it was a home, a furnace, and, too often, a tomb waiting for its next tenants. That day, our regiment rolled through the plains of Veor 9, a world recently declared in compliance after whispers of heresy. Our orders were simple: patrol, secure, and remind the locals that the Emperor's gaze had returned. Simple orders rarely remain simple. Competence was our shield. Garrin barked range data, Sella adjusted elevation by instinct alone, and Brann slammed a high-explosive shell into the chamber so smoothly you'd think he was born for it. I coaxed the machine forward, feeling the treads chew the dirt, listening for the faintest change in pitch that might mean a thrown gear or stressed cog. We trusted each other's roles like body parts, each vital, each irreplaceable. The countryside seemed peaceful enough, but no guardsman is ever fooled by silence. Auspex sweep showed nothing. Vox chatter spoke only of routine contact with command. Yet still Garrin kept scanning, eyes narrowed, jaw set. He'd served long enough to know that death rarely announces itself. "Driver, maintain formation," he growled. I obeyed, slotting our Russ between two others in a rolling wedge. Overhead, the sky was ash-gray, clouds lit by distant flashes of orbital fire. We could feel the war around us even if we couldn't see it. That tension, that sense of being prey despite our armor, was the constant companion of every tankman. It's worth noting what a Leman Russ truly is. To the Militarum, it's the backbone of the Guard's armored fist, durable, adaptable, mass-produced. To us inside, it's a beast barely restrained by steel. Its machine spirit growls at every command, and if you don't treat it with respect, it will kill you as surely as the enemy will. That day, the machine was restless. The gears whined louder than usual. The Vox hissed with phantom echoes. Sella spat into the bilge and muttered about omens. Garrin snapped at her, but none of us truly dismissed it. We'd heard the stories, tanks that went missing, tanks that whispered to their crews, tanks that burned from the inside without a single shot fired. As dusk fell across the plains, the Vox crackled with a sudden burst. "All armor units, hold position. Recon reports disturbance ahead. Possible contact." The message ended in static. Garrin swore softly, then keyed the command channel. "Driver, halt. Gunner, load anti-armor. Loader, you heard me." Brann was already ramming a penetrator shell home, the clang echoing like a funeral bell. I set the brakes, and the Russ shuddered to a halt, idling with a deep mechanical growl. We waited. In those moments, every scent stretched thin. My palms sweated on the controls. I could hear my own breathing over the hum of the engine. Outside, the wind carried the faint smell of ash and something else. Something metallic. The life of a tank crewman is not about glory. It's about waiting in steel silence, knowing that the next second could bring a shell through the armor, fire in your lungs, and your name etched on a regimental roll of the dead. That night, as the sky darkened to black and the plains grew quiet, we all felt it. The change in the air, the prickle of unseen eyes. Something was coming. Something that would test whether our steel coffin was a shield or our grave.
The night pressed down like a weight, heavy and suffocating inside the tank. Every breath tasted of promethium fumes and old sweat, yet we dared not open the hatches. Outside was worse. You could feel it in your teeth, a hum, a pressure, as though the very air was holding its breath. "Recon should have reported by now," Garrin muttered, his eye never leaving the periscope. His voice carried that edge, not fear, never fear, but the sharpness of a man who knows death is close. Then the Vox came alive again, not with orders, but with a scream. A ragged, distorted voice howled for Emperor and regiment before vanishing in static. Sella cursed, adjusting her headset. That wasn't interference, that was slaughter. Competence kept us moving. Garrin didn't panic, didn't freeze. Driver, slow advance. Loader, high explosive. Gunner, track the ridgeline. Orders, crisp, clean, practiced. We obeyed. That's the only way you survive inside a tank. Obey, act. Keep the machine alive. The treads ground forward, chewing the dirt with that bone-deep vibration. My hands gripped the controls, listening to the rust like a priest listens to a litany. The engine's growl felt wrong, but that could have been my own heart pounding too fast. Atmosphere pressed in. Through the vision slit, the world looked like shades of black and gray. The horizon was jagged, ruined by burned-out hab blocks from earlier compliance bombardments. Shadows moved there, though no auspex detected them. Shapes hunched, slinking low, the kind of movements that were too precise for animals and too erratic for trained soldiers. Sella whispered, "Emperor's mercy," but cut herself off when Garrin shot her a look. Then the first sign came, a flash. Not light, movement. The ground itself seemed to ripple, and for a moment the ridgeline ahead of us shifted like something vast was crawling beneath it. Brann spat onto the floor plate, his usual answer to the unexplainable. "Contacts!" Garrin snapped. "Driver, halt!" I locked the treads. Sella was already dialing elevation, the cannon's massive breech clanging as Brann slammed the shell home. The machine's spirit hummed in its iron throat, eager to be released. And then we saw them. At first it looked like men, ragged and stumbling, dressed in the tatters of PDF uniforms, but their faces were wrong, too stretched, too eager. Eyes glowed faintly in the dark, mouths split in grins too wide. Chaos had touched them, no more than touched. It had claimed them utterly. They surged forward with manic energy, screaming praises to names we dared not speak. Not organized, but not mindless either. They carried crude weapons, some even shouldering captured lasguns, and behind them something heavier shifted in the shadows. "Fire!" Garrin barked. The Russ answered like a god awakened. The battle cannon roared, shaking my bones, hurling a shell that turned the first wave into red mist and shattered earth. The shockwave rattled the tank, dust spilling from seams in the hull. Sella's lips twisted into a grin of satisfaction as she realigned for another shot. Competence pawn, they'd call it, watching professionals at their craft. Brann was already had another shell ready, muscles straining as he slammed it into the breach. Sella adjusted by millimeters, no wasted motion, every movement precise despite the chaos outside. But even as bodies rained down, more poured from the darkness. The cultists weren't breaking, they were laughing, shrieking, their joy louder than their screams of pain. Each kill only seemed to drive the survivors madder. "Driver, forward 10, crush the bastards!" Garrin's voice was iron. I obeyed, gears grinding, treads biting. The Russ surged ahead, its weight turning screaming heretics into pulp beneath tons of adamantium. The vibration shuddered through us as bones and armor alike snapped like twigs. The stink of blood and promethium filled the vents. Still, the shadows at the ridgeline worried me more than the mob. Shapes too large for men, the way the ground shuddered when they moved. Then over Vox a final fragment of command. "To heavy armor, Emperor save us!" before silence reclaimed the channel. Something bigger was coming, something our cannon alone might not stop. And inside the steel coffin, we all knew it.
The first clash with the foe is never forgotten. You can train for it, drill for it, tell yourself you're ready, but the reality of chaos charging at your hull is another thing entirely. The mob swarmed our position, fanatical voices rising louder than the engine's growl. We crushed them, shelled them, gunned them down with the coaxial heavy bolter, but still they came. The Russ was built to withstand armies, but inside it we were still 4 mortals, pressed together in a box of steel, trusting that faith and firepower would keep us alive. Sella's voice was steady as she called ranges. 70 meters, 50, 45. She lined up the next shot as Brann slammed another high-explosive round into the chamber. The battle cannon thundered again, blowing apart another knot of cultists, their bodies flung like rag dolls in the firestorm. Competence was our only answer to madness. My hands guided the Russ in short, brutal advances, grinding bodies beneath our treads, pivoting to keep our gun arcs clear. Garrin relayed orders like clockwork. Target, advance, pivot, fire. It was mechanical, precise, the only way to stay sane when chaos laughed outside your hull. But then came the real enemy. The ridge split open as something vast hauled itself into view. A tank. No, a parody of one. Its hull had once been Imperial, a Leman Russ like ours, but warped, swollen, its metal fused with flesh and rust. Demonic symbols burned across its armor, glowing faintly with warp fire. Its cannon drooled molten slag, its treads slick with blood. From the hatches, faces screamed soundlessly, half-fused into the twisted plating. "Traitor armor!" Garrin barked, eyes wide with fury rather than fear. "Driver, full advance! Gunner, load armor-piercing!" The loader didn't wait for confirmation. Brann was already heaving a penetrator shell into the breach, sweat swollen down his temple, muscles straining as the shell slammed home. Sella adjusted with surgical precision, sighting the warped beast as it lumbered toward us. We fired first. The penetrator screamed across the distance, striking the enemy's frontal plate. For a moment, it seemed to work. Sparks erupted, metal tore, but the thing only shuddered, bellowing in a sound that was half engine roar, half human wail. It fired back. The demon tank's cannon belched green fire, the shell slamming into the ground just meters from us. The explosion rocked the Russ, throwing me against my harness, rattling tools and casings across the floor. Warning runes flared red on the control panel. The machine's spirit growled in protest. "Status!" Garrin shouted. "Left tread intact. Minor hull breach in the stowage compartment," I barked back, eyes on the readouts, hands fighting the controls to keep us upright. "Maintain! Loader, another shell! Gunner, aim true!" We fired again, this time catching the demon tank's side armor as it angled to fire. The penetrator punched deep, tearing through its corrupted plating. Black ichor and smoke belched from the wound, faces shrieking as they melted into slag. For a heartbeat, hope flickered in the steel coffin. But the enemy wasn't alone. The cultist mob surged in its wake, hurling themselves against our hull, clawing at the armor as if their bare hands could tear it apart. Through the periscope, Garrin watched one drag a laser cutter against our vision slit, sparks spraying across the steel. Sella swung the heavy bolter around, the chatter of gunfire filling the compartment as she tore the cultists apart. Brass casings clinked against the floor, hot enough to sting where they brushed my skin. Still, the demon tank closed. Its cannon swiveled toward us again, glowing with warp heat. One hit to the right place, and our coffin would become a pyre. Brann jammed another shell into the breach with a grunt. "Last penetrator!" he shouted, sweat soaking his fatigues. Sella murmured a litany to the Emperor under her breath, then fired. The Russ roared with holy fury, the shell streaking across the field like a lance of light. It struck true, piercing the demon tank's corrupted heart. For a second, everything went silent. Then the twisted war machine detonated in a blossom of fire and gore, a shriek like 1,000 dying voices ripping through the night. The shockwave rattled us so hard I thought the hull would split. Debris rained down, chunks of molten metal clanging off our armor. The cultists froze, their screams turning from triumph to despair. Some fled, others hurled themselves suicidally against us, desperate to appease the god that had abandoned them. Inside the steel coffin, we were alive. Bruised, battered, deafened, but alive. The enemy's champion was dead. But as the smoke cleared, we all knew the battle wasn't over. Because when chaos loses one pawn, it always has another waiting in the dark.
The tank is burning. That phrase isn't a metaphor in the Astra Militarum. It's a sentence, a death knell, a curse whispered on every battlefield. When the Vox screamed, "Armor breach!" across our regiment's channel, I prayed it wasn't us. It was. The cultists didn't scatter after their demon engine died. They went rabid, flinging themselves at us with a desperation that reeked of madness. Frag charges slapped against our hull, lasbolts spattered across our plating, and then the hammer strike. A shaped charge landed square against our side armor. The blast tore through the external fuel tanks, sending fire cascading down the Russ's flank. The heat bled inward, a furnace pressing against our skin. Warning runes lit up in angry crimson, and the machine spirit wailed through the engine block like a wounded beast. "Driver, keep her steady!" Garrin barked, voice hoarse but steady as steel. His words held us together. They had to. I forced the Russ forward, gears grinding, treads shrieking under the strain. Flames licked across the viewport edges, and smoke began to seep inside. The air thickened, acrid, clawing down my throat. Brann was coughing already, sweat and soot plastering his face. Still, he heaved another shell into the breach. "Loaded!" he rasped, even as his lungs screamed. Competence, muscle memory over misery. Sella fired, each shot from the bolter and main gun defiance carved in steel. Brass clattered like rain, the stink of cordite mixing with smoke. She didn't look away, didn't falter. If the world ended outside, she would still adjust for windage. And Garrin, Emperor bless him, refused to yield. His voice was iron, cutting through the chaos. We're not dead until the Emperor says so. Drive, gunner, crush them. Loader, keep feeding her. We obeyed. That's what tankers do. But the fire spread. The stowage compartment was ablaze now, the flames hungry, gnawing their way closer to the munitions. The steel coffin was becoming exactly what the veterans had always warned us, a tomb waiting to ignite. Through the periscope, Garrin cursed. More shapes were emerging from the ridge, heavier silhouettes, twisted walkers clanking forward on warped limbs of metal and bone. Hell brutes, maybe. Chaos didn't care what shape its toys took, only that they killed. The Vox sputtered with fragments of other tank crews screaming, their death throes filling our ears. "Track's gone! Emperor save!" Then silence. "Hull breach! Get out! Get static!" We were alone. The fire reached deeper, and a muffled thump shook the rear compartment. Garrin didn't flinch. He slammed his fist on the comm panel. "We hold! Driver, ram through the bastards! We'll die moving forward, not choking on smoke!" I throttled the Russ, treads spinning, the tank surging like a wounded bull. Cultists scattered, crushed under our advance, their blood hissing against the burning hull. Each jolt rattled my teeth. Each impact drove the heat closer to unbearable. Inside, it was hell. Smoke turned the air to tar, black and choking. My throat burned raw. Brann's hands blistered where they touched hot casing. Sella's face was streaked with soot, but her eyes were locked to the sights, calm as ever. Then a new sound. Not fire, not shells, not the screams outside. A voice. It whispered through the Vox, soft, mocking, too clear to be interference. So much faith in steel, so much trust in your coffin. You are already mine. We froze. Even Garrin's hand trembled on the periscope. The voice slithered into every crevice, coiling around the smoke, heavy and intimate. Chaos wasn't just outside anymore. It was in the machine. The Russ shuddered, gauges flickering. The engine roared not in pain, but in laughter, a jagged metallic howl. My hands slipped on the controls, as if they fought me, as if the Russ itself was deciding who it belonged to. Garrin snapped, voice breaking but still defiant. "It's the machine spirit resisting corruption! Fight it! Don't give in!" I gritted my teeth, muscles burning, forcing the controls back under my command. The Russ screamed like a beast dragged on chains. The fire howled louder. We were burning, choking, breaking, and yet we refused. That's what it means to serve as a tank crewman in the Astra Militarum. You don't stop. Not when the fire licks your skin. Not when the enemy claws at your hull. Not when chaos whispers your doom. You keep fighting until either the machine dies or you do. The tension builds. Subscribe to witness more tales from the Dark Millennium.
Ashes and iron. That's what remained when the screaming stopped. The fire inside the Russ had become unbearable, filling every breath with agony. My lungs clawed for air that wasn't there. Brann was still loading, even as his uniform smoldered at the sleeves, his hands raw and blistered. Sella's voice had gone hoarse from smoke, but she never stopped firing. Her last burst from the heavy bolter spitting defiance into the night. Garrin stood over us all, one hand braced on the periscope, the other clutching his side where blood leaked through torn flak. The cultists were gone, crushed beneath our treads or scattered by the Russ's wrath, but the war wasn't. Ahead, the silhouettes of those chaos walkers drew nearer, glowing eyes glaring through smoke. The corrupted machine inside our tank whispered again, coaxing, tempting.
Stop resisting. Let the fire take you. I will carry you into eternity. But Garrin only spat blood onto the deck. Driver, one last push. We take them with us. My heart hammered. I understood. So did the others. Brann didn't argue. He slammed our final shell into the breach with a grunt that tore at his chest. Sella aimed, her burned hands steady. And I, choking, trembling, forced the Russ forward one last time. The machine spirit screamed in my ears, not corrupted, not lost, but furious. With every ounce of faith we had, we dragged it back from the abyss. The walkers loomed ahead, raising their weapons. Garrin gave the final order. For the Emperor. Sella fired. The last round left the chamber with a roar that felt like salvation. It struck one of the walkers dead center, detonating in a plume of fire that lit the night like false dawn. The chaos machine toppled, burning, its warped frame collapsing in shrieks of fury. But the cost was ours. The flames reached the ammo rack, and there was no stopping it. Garrin looked at us all, one by one, commander, gunner, loader, driver, and gave a nod. No words, none needed. We had served. The Russ exploded. When I awoke, I was lying in ash. The world was muffled, distant. My ears rang like cathedral bells. Somehow, impossibly, I'd been thrown clear of the wreck, my harness torn loose in the blast. Smoke curled from the shattered carcass of our tank, its frame twisted, its machine spirit silenced forever. Sella's seat was empty. Brann's laughter was gone. Garrin's orders no longer echoed in my ears. I was alone. Around me, the battlefield smoldered. Other tanks burned in the distance, pyres for heroes no one would remember. The walkers had retreated, for now. The cultists lay scattered in pieces. Victory, if you could call it that. I crawled toward the wreckage, my body screaming with every movement. I touched the blackened hull with what strength I had left. "We did it," I whispered, not to the others. They were with the Emperor now. I spoke to the machine itself, the coffin that had carried us into hell and given me one last breath to tell this tale. Ashes and iron. That's all that remains of a tank crewman's life in the Astra Militarum. You live, you burn, you break. And if the Emperor wills it, one survives to remember. I survived, but I was never whole again. Victory came, but it was no triumph. The field of Veor 9 was won at dawn, when fresh regiments finally arrived to cleanse the last of the cultists. They would tell the story of a successful engagement, of heretics crushed beneath the Emperor's armored might. They would not tell the story of Garrin, Sella, or Brann, names lost in the endless rolls of the dead. They would not tell the story of one crew's final stand inside a burning coffin. But I remember. That is my duty now. To serve as an Astra Militarum tank crewman is not glory. It is not banners or medals. It is steel pressed against your skin until it becomes a second flesh. It is the scream of the engine in your bones, the stink of smoke in your lungs, and the certainty that every breath could be your last. It is trusting 3 other souls more than yourself until the day the fire takes them and not you. The Emperor's light burns eternal, but at what cost? For us, the price was everything. The Emperor protects. More stories await.